Here we are, yes, doing the political compass with Darth Fenrir and Pipsqueak. How are you guys doing?
Doing all right.
One of those days, huh, Chris?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks like we already got a few people in the chat room. Jacob Melander, or Melander, I don't know how it's pronounced. My favorite political test is 9 Axes. We might do more of these. We might make this a series, but I really wanted to do this one because I took it years ago, and there are so many things about it that just tick me off, grind my gears, and all sorts of...
Yeah, these political compass tests, you know, the biggest problem with them is that, you know, I don't know about this one, but a lot of the ones I encounter, they tend to be very, like, open. They tend to have, like, very weirdly worded questions. Like, they're like...
Oh, these are terrible.
Like, they're like, do you believe that women should be equal? And you're like, well, what do you mean by equal? Like...
Exactly, yeah.
Like, equal legally, equal as in of outcome? Like, what do you mean?
Well, I think my biggest problem with the political compass is it's not the proper diamond-shaped chart like the Nolan chart. It's a full square where you have the libertarian right and libertarian left, and it's like, how does that work? Oh, I want to leave everyone alone on the right. No, I want to leave everyone alone on the left. It's like, what? No, it's just leaving everyone alone. There's no variation there.
Well, from what I read, historically speaking, the political compass was invented by the French Revolution. It was basically used by the Robespierre side to basically attack anyone they didn't like, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the left-right, it doesn't apply. If you apply the NAP consistently, then I don't see any variation for anything else politically. You know, that's the big problem. So why don't we get started with this? And so it starts off with page 1 of 6. The link is down below, by the way, if you want to play along. Just a few propositions to start with concerning, no less, how you see the country and the world. And so we're going to start right off here with a question that is exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about. If economic globalization is inevitable, it should primarily serve humanity rather than the interests of transnational corporations. So we have not one but two collectivist fallacies.
Yeah, it's like it's only benefiting transnational corporations. Yeah, but they're also benefiting you because they're bringing products and services that you want.
Yeah, and they're employing people, and yeah.
Oh, but those are sweatshops.
But it's like, serve humanity. If everyone's serving humanity, who's doing the serving?
Yeah.
Now that's the question you always want to have to...
Yeah, we're here to serve humanity. Yep. Wait a minute. It's a cookbook!
Exactly.
Yeah.
Leroy 2 in the chat makes a good point. Why is it that you can never put down neutral? Or I don't know. For this quiz, I think I'd like the option, this is a stupid question.
Yeah, and I think what I'm going to do with stupid unanswerable questions is just say strongly disagree to all of them. Because, I mean, if I don't even know what the question is asking, I mean, if they had worded it better, I might agree, but just to go screw them, I'm just going to say strongly disagree. So, and here we get to some more, my country, right or wrong. Of course, I strongly disagree with that, as every thinking person should.
Oh, yeah.
No one chooses his or her country of birth, so it's foolish to be proud of it. I'll agree with that. Our race has many superior qualities compared with other races.
Just to let you know, Shane, I'm getting lag on the video, but...
Yeah, that's probably the case. Yeah.
Okay, so what was the question again?
Our race has many superior qualities compared with other races. Yeah. Our wonderful race, yeah. Well, I mean, you know, there are certain races that generally produce people who are better at, playing basketball or something like that. So I don't know what many superior qualities you're talking about.
I mean, I'm not gonna, look, I'm not a racist or anything, but the biggest thing that's bringing down minorities are ironically the minorities themselves. I mean, when you are promoting, welfare, being gangsters and all that, and trying to improve your life is selling out to the man, well, you're doomed for failure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's like people of my particular race, Nordic white people, we don't do well in the sun for too long. Yeah. Get me out in the sun for half an hour, I need the SPF 50 and all that. But I'm just going to do strongly disagree. Because fundamentally, I don't think there's anything that makes one race any better than the other. On the whole, we're all basically the same.
That means you're colorblind.
Yeah,
I don't get why people think that's a bad idea. They're like, are you colorblind to other people's races? Yeah, and that's how it should be. Because it means you don't care.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Strongly disagree.
Oh,
Maxim 29. Maxim
Yeah,
29. The enemy of my enemy is my enemy's enemy. Nothing more, nothing less.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
In some cases, he might be my friend. In some cases, he might be an even bigger enemy. So.
Yeah, people. Yeah, that kind of mentality. That's the reason why a lot of Eastern Europeans hate us, because we sold them out to the Soviets. Because Stalin said, if you don't give me Eastern Europe, I'm gonna stop supporting, the Western war effort against the Nazis. And they're like, oh, we don't want that. So. Yeah.
Okay, so the next one is military action that defies international law is sometimes justified. Well, it depends on what international law says, doesn't it?
Yeah, because some of those international laws, they're really stupid. Like they want to ban certain types of weapons, and rightfully so, but they allow other weapons which are just as bad. It's like they're always worried about cluster bombs and all that. And don't get me wrong, cluster bombs are bad, but it's like, oh, you're raving about cluster bombs, but you're still allowing countries to have nuclear weapons and various other gadgets and gizmos that they shouldn't have.
Yeah, and they still won't ban landmines.
Yeah.
They still won't ban chemical weapons being used by government forces. Cough, cough, police, tear gas.
Oh yeah, and
So that's what that is. International law.
Well, it depends on who it is. If Assad gasses his own people in Syria, then it's bad. If the U.S. gasses its own people in Waco, Texas, it's good.
Yeah.
That's because the U.S. gassing its own people in Waco, Texas, is done by the police. There's a specific exception for law enforcement in UN international law concerning the use of chemical, which is stupid.
This is a little off topic, but I was watching a video about terrible weapons, and one of them was the MIRV nuclear weapon, and I was thinking, okay, whoever invented that weapon, it's pretty clear they had some deep hatred for humankind.
And the other problem with this question, what do they mean by military action? Because does that include defense when you're attacked?
Yeah, it's like...
And I mean, there have been cases where, some countries have acted defensively and the UN has gone, oh, you violated international law. What were they supposed to do? Just sit by and let themselves get killed?
Oh, yeah, I'm not gonna... I know this is a sensitive topic, but I think could be some of the conflicts, with Arab and Israel, and there's accounts of both sides doing that. There's accounts of both, the Palestinians and the Israelis acting, conducting, defensive military operations, and the UN's like, oh, no, you can't do that. That's violating the border dispute. It's like, those guys are firing rockets on us. What are we supposed to do?
Well, and the big example was, Iraq invading Kuwait, because that was portrayed as this whole big, it was completely, Kuwait didn't do nothing, and this was just a complete act of aggression, when Iraq had shown just all sorts of people, including the United States, that Kuwait had been slant drilling under the border to get Iraqi oil, and they were stealing the oil. And Saddam didn't really want to invade Iraq. He just wanted to seize those drilling platforms near the border so that he could get the oil back.
You mean Kuwait? So, why would Saddam
Kuwait? Yeah, but you know what I mean. Yeah, Kuwait.
Yeah.
All right. So stupid question. So strongly disagree. There is now a worrying fusion of information and entertainment.
That's rather ridiculous.
Sounds like
that's neither good or bad. If you change that to ideology, then yes, and that has been for 70 years, something, Hollywood and communists.
Sounds like this guy's a big fan of...
Well, it's been more like 200. I mean, if you look at what Thomas Jefferson said about the newspapers of his day, this is not a new problem. But, I mean, the problem... Why is making it entertaining a bad thing?
Yeah, sounds like whoever wrote this book, he's a big fan of Brave New World, which in my opinion I've read. I haven't read the book, but I've read like an entire summary of it, and I'm like, this place is supposed to be a dystopian how?
Yeah, if you read the book, it's pretty inhibitive because the information is all controlled, and when you try to, if you try to make your own news outlet, that's when they act against you or whatever. But
yeah, I know the thing about a lot of these books, because I saw a video about books that predicted the future and all that. You know, when you actually read the books and all that, you know, when people say, "Oh, these books predicted the future," it's like, well, not really. They just, you know. Like, for instance,
they looked at what was going on around them at the time and just extrapolated into the future.
Yeah, like a good example is, like, there was one book that predicted the internet and all that. I'm like, oh, really? It did? Then I found out, oh, the book was made in 1990. You do realize that the internet goes back to the late 70s, right?
Well, the closest one I would see is the Probability Broach. It was published in 79. And, I mean, he had, like... He called it the telecom, he didn't call it the internet, but it was in everyone's home, and everyone, instead of phoning each other, they did like video chats, and there were live streams. You know, the session of Congress were live streamed. They called it telecast, but not live stream. But that's the closest one I've seen that really predicted, you know, what the internet became.
But even still, I'm just going to point this out. Why are people more concerned about books of fiction when they should be looking at what's really going on? They're always like, you know, what's this work of fiction trying to tell us or whatnot? It's like, when at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Yeah, people in the chat are saying the delay is at least 30 seconds, but I guess if you're only looking at the live stream, it doesn't matter. But if you're trying to participate in the chat or in the voice chat, you know, dumb question, strongly disagree. Next page.
Okay.
All right. Page 2 of 6. Now the economy. We're talking attitudes here, not the FTSE index. People are ultimately divided more by class than by nationality.
Communist detected.
I'll go get Liberty Prime.
Well, I mean, if you mean the political class and everyone else, then yeah, that's the real class division. But, you know, that's why they have to create these fake class divisions like, you know, workers versus capitalists or, you know.
Oh, yeah. I've actually came across, you know, workers and all that, and I asked them, like, how come the business owners aren't considered workers? And they're like, well, because they're not, you know, actually doing backbreaking labor. They're just sitting in their offices and typing on computers and all that. I'm like, that's not working?
It's doing work, yeah.
Yeah, you know, a lot of business owners, they're often sitting in their offices working far longer hours than what you're working, and, you know, every day they're worried about, oh my god, are we making enough money today? Are we gonna get new investments? They're worrying about that, so it's very stressful.
MoXL says Fenrir is way too silent. Yeah, we were trying to fix that before we started the live stream.
I'm very sorry, guys. I don't know what's going on. I'm trying my very best. Right now I have my microphone up there, and I'm trying to talk as loud as I can, but I don't want to bother, you know, my roommates and all that, so...
Yeah, we're trying to figure out how to juice it up, but...
I'm trying my best, people. I'm very sorry.
Yeah. We're up. Yeah. I mean, it's sounding okay on my end. It's just not... It's nice when everyone's at the same level, but... Okay. Also, by nationality, I guess if you were to say by culture, you know, that would make more sense, but yeah, I don't know. Terrible question, strongly disagree. Controlling inflation is more important than controlling unemployment. Ah, yes, the Phillips curve. How long has that been debunked?
Yeah, last time I recall, inflation often leads to unemployment.
Yeah, well, and it's an interesting thing because you have the Nobel Prize for Economics, and yes, I know that's not exactly what it's called, but everyone knows it as that, so don't be a pedant.
They gave it to Paul Krugman.
Well, but I mean, they have given it, like, I think 7 different times, or maybe it wasn't 7, maybe it was like 4 times, but to 7 different people, because they had disproved the Phillips curve. Now, if you have, like, the Nobel Prize for Physics, someone disproves something in physics, like they disprove, the ether, and they get a Nobel Prize, and then they have to keep giving it the Nobel Prize to physicists who are disproving the ether, you're going to start to think there's something with academic physics, aren't you?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, how long is it? Yeah. I don't know. Bad question, terrible question, so I strongly disagree. Because corporations cannot be trusted to voluntarily protect the environment, they require regulation. It's regulation that keeps destroying the environment.
Yeah, government's the biggest polluter in the world.
Yeah. From each according to his ability to each according to his need is a fundamentally good idea, says Mr. Karl Marx.
No, it's not, because as we said before, resources are finite, but human wants and desires are infinite.
Yep. I mean, how do you define ability? How do you define need? How do you determine all these things?
Yeah, that's a...
From each according to his production to each according to his political connections.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. It is a sad reflection on our society that something as basic as drinking water is now a bottled, branded consumer product. No, it's a good thing. It's a good thing.
It's a fundamentally good reflection on our society that something as necessary as drinking water is available at abundance within 2 k's of where you...
Oh yeah, whoever wrote this question, I'm pretty sure people in places like Flint would totally agree with you.
Yeah. Or all the people who are out, stocking up on bottled water because there's a hurricane coming or something like that. I bet they're really glad those are on the shelves,
Yeah, I honestly hate, questions and all that like this. It reminds me of, of a lot of anti-capitalist and consumerist fiction, where they talk about how, everything's just one giant advertising, and I'm reading it and I'm like, dude, you need to see a therapist because you're clearly clinically depressed.
Land shouldn't be a commodity to be bought and sold, yeah, because it works out so well when land is held in commons, doesn't it?
Oh yeah,
land is one of the most basic fundamental commodities. So many things you cannot produce without at least some form of land.
Yeah, and when it's commonly owned, what do they call it? The tragedy of the commons? It's called that for a reason.
Yep.
And in a lot of cases in history, tragedy is meant literally because it's resulted in tons of people starving to death.
Oh yeah.
All right. Let me check the chat a little more before we go on to the next one.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was about to say something about American Indians, but I mean, the American Indians are a perfect example of why you can't have collective land ownership, because one thing that often gets ignored, one of the reasons why a lot of American Indian villages and tribes are so poor is because everything's collectively owned and no one's allowed to do anything, so a lot of people don't have an incentive to work.
Well, but I mean, you can't paint all the tribes with the same brush. There were some tribes that actually had some pretty sophisticated systems of property rights. Yeah.
Yeah, quite a few of them did. I'm just saying the current ones now, because they're collectively owned and they're all owned by the tribal governments. You can't, own anything, so people have no incentive to build and produce things. They just...
You're talking about now with the reservation system.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the worst thing they possibly could have done to them. All right, so this Braille.Sky, guy, whatever his name is, I'll bet all my money Shane will be in the middle of the libertarian right sector. That's where it put me, and I answered in the most purest ANCAP way. Some of these questions, I don't know how you answer in the ANCAP way because they're just that badly worded. And solution, there should be at least one more axis, political, economic, social. I mean, they're all the same thing. It's all about human interaction and whether you want to force yourself into it.
Oh, that's the next one's going to be real fun.
Yeah. A single spectrum of ANCAP to communist is enough. Manny Kabilt, economic access matters the least. If you're not going to coerce people, then economics is just a preference of how people associate. Well, I mean, that's the point. You know, what about personal or social or economic issues? It's all about how people come together and interact with each other. It doesn't suddenly change in a moral or ethical standpoint just because there's money involved.
Yeah.
The political Klein bottle test. Oh boy. Now we're adding a fourth dimension in. All right. What's this next question you were talking about, Darth? It is regrettable that many personal fortunes are made by people who simply manipulate money and contribute nothing to their society.
If they contributed nothing to their society, they wouldn't be rich.
Yeah, I mean, why do they think people are willing to pay for this?
Yeah.
You know? I mean, they're not just manipulating money. It's called investing. It's called doing things that provide the capital to expand the economy, increase jobs, increase workers' salaries, you know.
Yeah. That's why I like Donald Trump, you know, before he became a politician, because he was a good businessman before he became a politician, you know.
Well, he had some... John Stossel many times got him for things like, you know, using eminent domain, you know, to seize people's property and get what they want. So he, you know... He wasn't...
But that's a state thing, though.
But I mean, he's always, you know, schmoozed with, like, the Clintons and people like that. He's got his political connections.
I find it. So I just find this funny. If you apply this to this point to the people that run central banks, I would agree with it 100%.
Well, that's true. If you're talking about the Federal Reserve, yeah.
Yeah, and certain types of federal governments, because a lot of those, I mean, especially a lot of those congressmen, you know, they get so many perks and benefits, and what did they do to deserve them? Well, they all voted for it.
Yeah, they all schmoozed around and...
Yep. Yeah, if I recall correctly, each senator, like, they get their own little personal set of toiletries, you know, that has, like, their name engraved on it, and they get, and they get, like, these really nice, you know, severance bonuses and all that, and all they have to do is sit in a room and listen to a boring guy talk for a few hours every day.
Yeah. Protectionism is sometimes necessary in trade. No, well, maybe necessary for politicians who want to grab other people's money and their cronies, but not for anyone else.
Yeah.
Certainly not for the people.
But Shane, how are we going to protect American jobs from them damn Chinese people? Them Chinese is taking over this country.
Yeah, so we'll use tariffs and we'll make the Chinese pay for it. No, tariffs mean we pay for it, not the Chinese.
Yeah.
The only social responsibility of a company should be to deliver a profit to its shareholders. Well, that's kind of the idea.
Yeah, I mean, how else are they going to provide their goods and services if they can't make a profit? They can't afford to keep doing it, you know.
That's the measure of how much benefit they're giving to society, is how much money people are willing to voluntarily give up for it. I mean, unless you're... We have to, like, do the disclaimer, because there's always people going to come in, well, you know, there's a lot of them, they get these subsidies from the government and everything. It's like, yeah, we know that, but the question isn't talking about that.
Yeah, it's...
The rich are too highly taxed. Everyone is too highly taxed. Taxation is theft.
Yeah. Everyone's highly taxed.
Those with the ability to pay should have access to higher standards of medical care.
How many times do we have to bring this up? If the government stayed out of the healthcare business like it used to, we could afford healthcare.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just worded so that, again, it's not asking you for your opinion on an issue. It's driving you emotionally, you know, to want to disagree. It's like, oh no, how heartless. I mean, like you don't have access. Well, we looked at your income statement, so we're going to drop the cage down and you're not allowed to come in. No, that's not how it works.
Yeah, it should have access to higher standards of medical care. And it's like, well, what do you mean by that? You know, look, you know, there are, you know, insurance companies and charitable groups out there that actually help people who legitimately struggle to pay for expensive healthcare, and as the government, but sadly, as the government gets more and more involved, those types of groups are disappearing.
But it's like, take MRIs. When they first came out, of course they were going to be expensive, and the government went unfair, and put a price cap on them. What does that do? I mean, if you compare that to, HD TVs, the flat screen, widescreen, high resolution televisions, they started out at like, $50,000 or something like that. But because the poor didn't have access to them and only the rich did, then that fueled the production of better and better models until you can get one for $100.
Yeah, there was an episode of John Stossel where they covered healthcare, where one woman compared, the healthcare problem to when cars first came. When cars, first came, like in the 1880s, they were incredibly expensive. They were more expensive than houses, and only the super duper elite and wealthy could afford them. But then guys like Henry Ford came along and figured out a way to properly mass produce them and make them cheaper. So even regular poor people could at the very least rent them.
But it's like with MRIs, they're just still expensive, just because you don't have this early adopter effect. And like one example is, it's a huge problem because we're running out of helium, and MRIs require liquid helium to cool the superconductors. Well, they've been saying that all along that they need all this more investment money to work on superconductors that can be cooled by liquid nitrogen instead of liquid helium, because that's a lot easier to produce. We don't have a shortage of nitrogen. That's 78% of the air around us. So if you don't have that kind of thing driving that, if it might have been that the first is like, only an elite few could get it, but then the price would drop, and then they would have innovations like, cooling with liquid nitrogen or whatever, all sorts of other things that would make them cheaper. So,
and then of course the government will come along, pass some sort of law and say, oh, see, look, we made the product cheaper and safer, even though it was already cheap and safe to begin with.
Governments should penalize businesses that mislead the public. Who's going to penalize government when it misleads the public?
Yeah, and not to mention, who's going to decide what misleads the public? That's why I can't stand the whole fake news, thing.
Right.
Because it's more of a buzzword. And yeah, don't get me wrong, there is fake news out there, but the problem is that it's being interpreted as, those fringe people, on the YouTubes, yet I'm seeing more of the fake news coming from the big media sources.
I mean, there is actual fraud out there, and that's an app violation, but they're just saying mislead. They're not saying, commit fraud or commit, slander or libel or things like that.
Yeah, again, I know it's cliche for me to bring him up, but John Stossel said what made him first become a libertarian was because when he covered, consumer products, he often went after, those people that were scamming you. Like, a good example is they said, we have a high-tech clothes drying machine that's solar powered, and when you buy it for like $100, they give you a clothesline. And you know what he noticed? He noticed that eventually, once enough people, got scammed by them, they got publicly outed and they lost business. And it was only not until long after the con man, was kicked out of town or went out of business that the government came in and said, oh, okay, let's pass this law. Yay, we made the con man go away. It's like, no, you didn't.
Yeah, they jump in front of a parade and pretend to lead it.
Yeah, people, if you're scamming people, once your scam's found out, you're a pariah. They're not going to do business with you anymore.
Yeah. Oh, Daft UK said that in the chat. The people will penalize them.
Yeah.
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 And Darky, I agree. I hate those emotionally loaded questions. Yeah. That's what these all are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. Bad question, so strongly disagree. I do not disagree with misleading the public, but I disagree with that stupid question. The way it's worded and everything about it. Yeah. A genuine free market requires restrictions on the ability of predator multinationals to create monopolies. A free market is how you avoid that.
Yeah, how many...
And gotta love predator it's predator. They're coming after you. They got big teeth.
Yeah. I ask people all the time, like, how would corporations take over without a government? And they're like, well, because they have money, and they can buy, mercenaries and all that. Yeah, but you'll have guns too, so you can fight back, It's,
right.
stop getting your scenarios from really crappy and poorly written 1980s sci-fi movies.
Yeah, and Manny in the chat, this test is heavily biased to favor the left. Most, if not all, questions make some pretty big assumptions about the state and or collectives. Yeah, so I mean, it's like we're assuming that, like with the mislead the public thing, we're assuming the only way to do that is with the state.
Yeah.
At least this one's pretty straightforward. The freer the market, the freer the people. Because what is the market?
It's people.
The market is people, yes. You can't restrict the market without restricting people. That's how it works.
2 pages in, we finally got one we actually like.
No, there were a couple I agreed to, but...
It's like, no, that's not true. Markets are corporate, our corporate groups and advertising and consumerism. Yeah, take some more Valium, you nihilistic, depressed guy.
All right, page 3, personal social values. There we are, straightforward when a woman's life is not threatened, should always be illegal. I'll disagree with that. All authorities should be questioned. Yep, that's absolutely necessary. Look at what's going on in Hong Kong right now. You need to be able to...
I mean, these social questions, though, these are the ones that really piss me off, because it's like... Because, again, they always talk, because they often, as you said, they go to the emotions, but they never talk about it. Like, for instance, I've seen Political Compass things where they talk about abortion, where they say, you support abortion, don't you? And it's like, well, what do you mean by that? Do you mean, because here's what I tell people. Politically, I'm for it being legal, but personally, I'm against it. But a lot of these political compasses don't allow for that. They don't allow for that.
You either want abortions or you want them all to be illegal. I really don't like abortions, but I don't like the government making them illegal.
Yeah, and I actually told that to a person, who's pro-life and all that, and I told them I'm only pro-choice on political, philosophical purposes, but personally, yeah, if a woman says, she's pregnant and she wants to abort the baby, I'll do my best, to convince her not to do it. But what I'm against is sending police after her and saying, nope, you're not aborting that baby. You're gonna have it. That's what I'm against.
Peter McCain's talking about the speaker political test, and he says it's a lot longer and more libertarian aimed. Man, this one's long enough as it is. Yeah. It's just really, really long. All right. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, leaves the whole world blind and toothless.
Yep.
It entirely depends on what actually the author means when they ask this question, because when that was originally penned, like 2,000 years ago, that was a limitation. That was designed so... No,
well, yeah.
Like, if somebody gouges at your eye, you can't go over and kill him and rape his wife. No, you have to limit it to the damage they did to you. It was a limitation, not a prescription. People keep treating it like it's a prescription. It ticks me off.
That's true, but then if you go and you read the New Testament with what Jesus was saying about it, it's clear that people even then were interpreting it that if someone takes out your eye, the just thing to do is automatically to take out some other eye, not just as a limitation, but as a prescription.
And that's why we have this cruel and corrupt prison society, because instead of actually trying to reform these people and make them productive citizens, as I think you pointed out one time, they're just torture and revenge fantasies for a lot of people.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, put him in a big cell, not, keep him in solitary confinement for several days, and the only human interaction he gets is a date with Bubba in the showers.
Taxpayers should not be expected to prop up any theaters or museums that cannot survive on a commercial basis or anything else.
Yeah, if it's not going to survive on a commercial basis, I don't want taxpayers funding it.
Yep. Schools should not make classroom attendance compulsory. You can't force someone to learn. And if you force them to be there, it's just going to make it so that their natural tendency to learn is inhibited.
Yeah, that's the reason why a lot of kids, hate school. It's not because, they're bad, and they don't want to learn. Kids want to learn. They're interested in gaining education. The thing we're against is, being forced to sit in front of a school for 8 hours a day to some boring teacher, that's making us fall asleep. And then, when we fall asleep, they're like, oh, your kid can't pay attention in class. I think he's got development issues.
All people have their rights, but it's better for all of us. The different sorts of people should keep to their own kind.
What does that mean?
I have no idea what that means.
I have no idea.
That's a terrible question.
Yep.
Good parents sometimes have to spank them. No violence against children.
Been debunked.
It's natural for children to keep some secrets from their parents. Sure, I mean, you gotta let them be themselves.
Oh,
and
yeah.
if you let them be themselves and have more of their secrets, then they're more likely to open up to you and talk to you about them.
Yeah, I mean, that's the, I mean, I ain't gonna lie, she's not here because she's at work, but one of the reasons why I rarely go to my mom, when I have any personal issues, is not because I don't love her or don't trust her, it's just because she was such a nosy person growing up and she was always getting in your business that nowadays I honestly don't feel comfortable discussing my emotions because I'm afraid, well, is she gonna take it seriously or not?
Possessing marijuana for personal use should not be a criminal offense. Possessing marijuana for any use should not be a criminal offense.
Yeah.
Possessing anything, any item, any inanimate object for personal use or any use should not be a criminal offense.
Sure, but that means you want kids to buy heroin out of vending machines.
How are kids going to buy... Every time my kids bought something out of a vending machine, it's because I took them to the vending machine and gave them the money to do it.
Yeah, I know,
Yeah.
and I know, and it's pretty funny because they're like, don't worry, don't worry, I mean, it's like, and it's like people, we know prohibition doesn't work with alcohol. We know it doesn't work with drugs. Although they're still in denial, we know it doesn't work with guns. When are we going to realize prohibition doesn't work?
Yeah, but little Billy is going to take the money he gets from mowing lawns and go to a vending machine and get a machine gun.
How about this one? The prime function of schooling should be to equip the future generation to find jobs.
That's weirdly worded because on one hand, yeah, education plays a role with that, but the problem is that, see, the biggest problem with schooling, and this is what I hate about colleges, is they send you to a university to 2 to 4 years, and from what I've seen, a lot of the stuff they make you do in college is completely worthless in the job market, and a lot of the stuff that, that they teach you in college, if you were to get an apprenticeship, they could teach you that for way less than that amount of time, and it's actually more practical,
Yeah, same thing with regular school. I mean, how long did you spend learning to diagram a sentence, and how many times do you use that in the real world? And think of how much better off you would be if you'd been taught in school how to make a decision tree. Because those are incredibly useful in just about everything.
Yeah,
I don't know how many years I spent in school. The most recent job I got was like, alright, we need to teach you to use this program. Here's a course. It runs for 2 days.
Yeah.
So
a lot of this stuff nowadays
you came back and immediately got to work.
A lot of this stuff nowadays you can teach yourself. A lot of these, developers that are really popular and doing a lot of things, they don't have high school diplomas. They just learned to code and got into it.
Yeah, and Shane, here's another thing that I hated about the schools I went to is that a lot of the schools I went to, they were more concerned with, how you were doing your work instead of whether or not you got the right answer. And there were plenty of cases I saw, where kids clearly got the wrong answer, but they still got full marks because, well, they did all the work. It's like, no, that's not how the real life society works. Real life society doesn't give a rat's ass, on how hard you worked on something. If you don't do what we asked you to do and you don't get the right answer, you failed.
Terrible question. Strongly disagree.
Yep.
People with serious inheritable disabilities should not be allowed to reduce. Now, who would agree with that? No one's going to agree to that nowadays. Even though the left still has the policies that make it happen, they don't think that's what it does.
They just don't realize that. That's the funny irony is that, they talk about how evil fascists, right-wingers are, yet a lot of the stuff they want was proposed. In fact, if I recall correctly, the first eugenics and fascists that came out, they were from the left. Mussolini started out as a Marxist people.
Doesn't this
Jacob
solve itself? Like, natural selection works for humans just as well as it does for anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But eugenics isn't natural selection, it's artificial selection.
Yeah.
Jacob in the chat asks, Bitcoin or gold? Well, At this point, if those are the only two options, I'm probably going to have to go with gold, because taking a week to make a transaction and having to pay dollars for it to happen, But if you're talking about other cryptocurrencies like Dash, then yeah, I'll go with those.
Plus gold is universally seen as valuable, where some businesses are still questioning whether or not Bitcoin is valuable, which it is, but not everyone's getting the message, Whereas if you show them a gold bar, they're like, "Ooh, now you're speaking my language."
Well, and Braille Dots guy was talking about Bitcoin and all coins are movable, gold is a physical item. You have services like Gold Money, where you can do stuff like that. Unfortunately, and when they tried to do things like eGold and Liberty Dollar and Liberty eDollars and things like that, the government came in and shut them down and raided their offices and things like that. So
yeah, the only reason we're still not using gold is because most governments made it illegal. And in fact, there's even been cases, like you said, Shane, where people have actually been raided by the police because they had a bunch of gold or silver surplus. And they're like, wait a minute, why would you have all that gold? He must be a weapon/drug/human trafficker. We gotta stop him.
It's left over from the 30s. FDR had that law passed that any gold that was held by a citizen for any reason other than something practical or like jewelry or whatever, if it's just sitting there as gold bars, the government can seize it, gold or silver. I think combining crypto with gold could fix the issues but I think there is one that's pegged to gold. Tether is pegged to the dollar. I think there's another that's pegged to the price of gold. So they do have cryptocurrencies that are pegged to various different things. But anyway, the most important thing for children to learn is to accept discipline. What does that mean?
And I'm in the middle of this one because discipline's good, but again, the problem is, what if the authority figure's wrong,
Right. They need to be able to question that, but at the same time, discipline is good in the sense of, I've got to go to work at 8 o'clock. I need to wake up early enough so I can get a shower and get ready for it and all of that. And just have the discipline to, yeah.
I think the problem that I see a lot is that we're teaching children to listen to an outside voice instead of learning how to manage themselves, which is legit discipline, which is, like you said, it's learning to get up out of bed, take care of yourself, be able to clean up, know how to do your stuff. Whereas we're just teaching kids, it's like, no, you do what I say and don't ask questions, but that's a bad thing to teach people.
Let's see. I'm just going to say bad question and strongly disagree.
Yeah.
There are no savage and civilized peoples, there are only different cultures. Yeah, nothing wrong with the Nazis, I guess. Nah, wrong.
Disagree. Oh yeah. Or a perfectly good example that people don't want to talk about, Islam. It's like there's no savage and civilized people, and Islam is just a different culture. Yeah, a culture that says it's okay to kill your kids because they're gay and that girls have to be completely covered up or else they're asking for a raping.
Well, I can understand it from the historical and anthropological point of view, where we're looking at the past and we want to look at it objectively, without judgment, and see the things from the eyes of, like Neolithic cultures or whatever, to understand how they saw the world. That I can understand, but,
Well, again, and I tell this to people, my problem with Islam isn't the religion. It's that it hasn't gone through, the Lutheran Reformation. It hasn't realized, it hasn't realized, what, this is the 21st century now, and we should update our religion to 21st century standards. And the few attempts where it has been tried, it's failed.
Those who are able to work and refuse the opportunity should not expect society support. Whose society? Are you talking about taxpayer support? Because then I'll agree, but I mean, charities, family members.
I mean, I'm not against charities or family members voluntarily taking care of you. I mean, that's another thing that I hate, is when I tell people I'm against, taxpayer-funded welfare. They're like, "Why do you hate the poor?" And like, I don't hate the poor. I'm just saying, I mean, you got to take some responsibility for yourself. I mean, I'm sorry, but a lot of people who are legit homeless, they often became homeless because of their own fault, because they refused, to get help, or they had, issues that they need to take care of. I've heard from actual ex-homeless people that said what made them stop becoming homeless wasn't that they got a lot of money or they got a job. It's when they finally took personal responsibility for their life and was able to get back.
When you are troubled, it is better not to think about it, but to keep busy with more cheerful things. What the hell does this question have to do with politics?
Yeah.
Why is this even here?
And I disagree with it regardless, because as a guy who does suffer from personal issues like that, it's like you can't just smile the things away. If you're clinically depressed or have bipolar, it's not going to be stopped by meditating and thinking about frolicking puppies and ponies. You know, you got to go to a therapist and say, "Doc, I don't know what to do. I keep trying to smile, but every time I look up, I see ugliness and hideousness, and they need to." And maybe you need medication. Maybe you just need, therapy. I don't know. Or
maybe you just need to look around and say, why are you troubled, and fix it. So,
yeah.
Strongly disagree, because screw whoever wrote that question.
Yeah.
First-generation immigrants can never be fully integrated. That happens all the time.
Absolutely disagree. My own family history disproves. Most of my family is German. They're coming over from Hanover region in the 1870s. All 90% of them intermarried with the existing population within the first generation.
Pitswick, I know another Australian who has a similar family background. I'm noticing that there's actually a lot of Australians that have German ancestry in them. I guess it's because that's where a lot of them went after the Nazis collapsed, and it was
even before that, there's a lot of German families that came over due to religious persecution in the 1800s.
Yeah, that's the thing that I don't think people get to ignore. German people used to be found everywhere on every single continent, but then after World War II, Germany became associated with Nazism, and a lot of nations kicked the Germans out, so...
What's good for the most successful corporations is always, ultimately, good for all of us. Oh my God. Always, ultimately...
Very, very badly worded question, and it's talking in absolutes.
Well, yeah, and when you're talking about what's good, are you including things like tariffs and other forms of protectionism, eminent domain, seizing property to give to them?
Yeah, this reminds me of. It reminds me of, this biggest pet peeve I talked about, when I was talking to my boss, about how they force us to come to work even when they're sick, and he's like, so what? I once came to work even though I couldn't keep anything down, and I was running to the bathroom every 5 minutes, and I still showed up for work, and I'm like, well... That's not something to be proud of. In fact, especially because we work in the food business, man. It's like, if you can't keep anything down, you shouldn't even be at work.
Oh yeah, strongly disagree, because screw the question writer.
Yep.
No broadcasting institution should receive public funding. Okay, there's a good one right there.
Yeah.
All right. What page are we on? Oh my God, we're only halfway through. All right.
Actually, Shane, just a little off topic. I don't know if they're going to talk about it. It also reminds me of Planned Parenthood, because when I criticized Planned Parenthood, they're like, "Oh, so you're saying we should teach abstinence and only?" I'm like, "No, I'm just saying Planned Parenthood shouldn't be getting subsidized. Nobody should be getting subsidized by the government."
Right.
Raise your own funds, Planned Parenthood, and if you can't, well, then you're doing something wrong.
Well, and with Planned Parenthood, just like PBS, it's been shown that, when their funding has, been threatened, other people step up and donate. And so if you look at the figures and extrapolate it out, that means, if you eliminate federal funding, the amount of private funding that would step in, they would actually get more money being privately funded.
I remember something like that happening with Sesame Street when the government was going through a shutdown. Everyone's like, "Oh no, Sesame Street's gonna go out. We won't be able to see Elmo and Big Bird." But then a bunch of people came in and they donated, hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, to PBS, and they were able to keep Sesame Street going. In fact,
now HBO has it now.
Well, yeah. Well, this was before HBO bought it, so.
Yeah, HBO has it, and then I think 6 months later or something, PBS gets to show it, but HBO gets it first.
Yeah.
Our civil liberties are being excessively curbed in the name of counterterrorism. Of course they are.
Yeah. I still say that's a poorly worded question, because it's like, they're telling it to, because everyone knows that's a fact. What it should be asking, do you think this is an effective way, and do you think it's necessary to do that? That's a...
They're asking you a statement of fact and not your opinion, yeah.
Yeah, which is what this thing should be doing, because everyone accepts, that we're losing our abilities. The thing is whether or not the difference is some people think it's wrong, whereas other people think it's like, yeah, it's a little excessive, but we can't let those terrorists win, so...
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good criticism. A significant advantage of a one-party state is that it avoids all the arguments that delay progress in a democratic political system. Yeah, because that's so what we see from one-party states, so much progress.
Yep.
What happens if the one party is wrong? They go in the complete opposite direction and go backwards. Like, that's not... Yeah. I have seen this question worded slightly differently in a one-party state is more quick to make decisions, which is accurate, because if you vest one person with all the power, anything they say goes, so decisions are made extremely quickly. That doesn't mean they're right.
Yeah, and what's weird is that it sounds like they're trying to word it so it sounds like, you're trying to be a right-wing fascist, but we tend to see single-party states, more with the left. Seriously.
Oh, yeah.
Perfectly good examples. Look what happened in Vietnam. When they elected Ho Chi Minh, what was one of his first orders? Only the Communist Party is allowed to run for elections.
Although the electronic age makes official surveillance easier, only wrongdoers need to be worried. Strongly disagree.
Oh, I strongly... Yeah, same here.
The death penalty should option. It should never be an option. No death penalty. Yeah. And a civilized society... Three Dots Guy says legalize murder. Well, the government already has for them. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
265 million, or 262 million people in the 20th century murdered by governments. Only 9 million.
Yeah, and you remember those drone leak papers where they were teaching drone? Don't worry, if instead of dropping bombs on a terrorist training camp, you accidentally dropped it on a school for blind orphans, well, they were terrorists in training anyway.
Yeah, it's collateral damage. Don't worry about it. What are you, hate your country or something? Yeah. All right, in a civilized society, one must always have people above to be obeyed and people below to be commanded. Strongly disagree with that. Which is not the same as, by the way, working for a boss, because that's a voluntary arrangement. You agree to do the work, and so, of course, the boss assigns you tasks, and in exchange, you get paid. That's how that works.
That's another problem, too, is, like you said, is they can't tell the difference between a state authority and just a boss, because, the thing is, a boss doesn't really force you, it doesn't have as much power, really the biggest problem is, and I'll admit I'm guilty of it, is people tell themselves, oh, I'm stuck in this job, I can't do it. It's like, no, if you really hate this job and it's hurting your health, just go to your boss and say, you know what, take this job and shove it and just get out of there. You can do that. You have the freedom to do that. You can't do that with a state.
Okay, y'all ready for me to be triggered? This is the question. This is the one I keep using as an example of how bad this quiz is. Abstract art that doesn't represent anything shouldn't be considered part at all. How much do I hate this question? Let me count the ways.
First off, this doesn't have anything to do with political questions. Second
exactly. Yes. It's not political.
Second of all, well, it's true. You can call almost anything art. I mean, anything can be considered art. My problem with the postmodern art movement is like they're trying to say it's more intelligent when it's like, no, it's like, yeah, you can call anything
art. Whereas you had like the Dadaists, their mission was to ask the question, what is art, and not answer it, just get people to ask themselves, what is art to them.
That's another thing I hate is when people bring up the Dada movement, is that the Dadaists, did what they did because of that. They were trying to make that discussion, and two, they did it in response to World War I because, they were being told, oh yeah, war is a good thing and all that, and it's like, wow, if violence and death is a good thing, then screw it. Let's draw a picture of a urinal because that's beautiful.
But it's not even, the abstract art that doesn't represent anything. Abstract art does represent something. You take a form or an object or an idea and you abstract it. That's why it's called abstract art.
Yeah,
So, Duchamp descending a staircase,
Yeah,
or Brancusi's bird. He didn't sculpt the bird. He sculpted the motion of the bird as it flew.
My problem with a lot of postmodern abstract art is that it's either A, there's little to no effort being thrown at it, like that giant canvas that's just completely blank,
Yeah.
Or two, it's being disturbing and disgusting just for the sake of being disturbing and disgusting. Like that guy that drew a picture of the Virgin Mary using human feces and pornographic clips. It's like, well, what are you trying to do? It's like, oh, it's disturbing. Yeah, but why? What's the point? You know.
It's disturbing.
Well, I mean, there can be valid artistic reasons to want to disturb the viewer. I mean, that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to evoke some kind of reaction. Yeah, but I mean, yeah, just for the sake of doing it, you know. But art that doesn't represent anything is non-objective art, and it is hard to do. I mean, you might think, oh, just slap something out and then it doesn't resemble anything. To do it properly and to have things still have things like form and motion and, you know, the proper framing and everything like that, and have it not resemble anything but be something unique unto itself, that's actually hard.
Yeah,
that's really hard.
Here's a story. I don't know if it's true, but it's a story our teacher used to tell us. It was about an artist. He was so good at painting that his paintings were practically alive. So they told him, make us something that'll blow our minds off. And he's like, sure, I can do that. But to avoid spoiling, I'm gonna keep it hidden behind a brick wall, and it'll be removed, you know, when it's time to be revealed. So they do that, and finally everyone goes in there, and he says, I'm ready, and they're like, remove the brick wall, and then finally he says, actually, I removed the brick wall days ago. I finished the painting already. You're looking at the painting, and it was a brick wall, but it was so realistic that people thought it was separating it.
That's good. I like that. There was this one, I think it was at the Smithsonian. You come in from this door, and I think it was like a picture of an old woman or something like that, and it looked like a photograph. It looked exactly like a photograph. When you got close to it, you could see it was fingerprints.
Yeah,
he had just done it with his fingerprints.
Yeah, I think the term for that is trompe-l'oeil, which is a really old French term, which means trick the eye. And the point of it isn't really to make the painting look anything fantastic or anything. It's just to make it extremely realistic. That, like, for instance, if you're painting a picture of like a scenery, it's to look like, oh, am I looking out a window?
Yeah.
Yeah, like that.
All right, so terrible question, strongly disagree.
Yep.
In criminal justice, punishment should be more important than rehabilitation. No, we talked about that a little earlier.
Yeah, you talked about that on the Bogosity podcast. Yeah.
Yeah. It's become more about, you know, vengeance and just, you know, these are animals that we have to whip into shape or whatever.
Oh yeah, that totally works. Yeah. And then we wonder.
Next question is related. It's a waste of time to rehabilitate some criminals. Nah.
That's bullcrap. I mean, you know what? Here's a perfect example of what I point out, that even the most violent people can be reformed. Look at David Berkowitz, or AKA the son of Sam. You know, I mean, granted, I don't want that guy being set free because of what he did, but you know, he was a very violent individual. And when he first got into prison after being arrested for his serial killing, he was called Berserkowitz. But now he's pulled a complete 180. He's actually a model citizen. He's helping other prisoners go there. In fact, he's so reformed and rehabilitated that when he was brought up for parole, he said, oh, no, I don't deserve to be free. I deserve to spend my final moments, you know, here in prison where I can at least help other prisoners because I'm ready to pay for that. I mean, seriously. And he was initially a bloody psychopath, and now he's done a complete 180, so...
Here's another terrible one. The business person and the manufacturer are more important than the writer and the artist. But writers and artists are a kind of businessman and manufacturer.
Yeah, it's like...
It's not for politics to decide, it's for the market to decide.
Yeah, that's what I, you know what I tell people, you know, how important they are. It's like, are people enjoying your art? Do you have followers? Do you have money from your artwork or your writing? And if the answer is yes, then, well, you are important because it means people are getting value out of it, you know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I mean, artists sell paintings, writers sell books. Yeah,
you know, I mean, if you've got clients, if you got fans, if you got, you know, people that are paying you for commissions, then yeah, you are important because it clearly means you're good enough that people see value in what you're doing, you know?
Terrible question, strongly disagree. Mothers may have careers, but their first duty is to be homemakers. Disagree with that.
Well, I mean,
multinational... What's that?
I was just about to say that's a stupid question because it really is up to the individual, you know.
Right.
I will say this, feminists, as hard as it is to believe, there are women out there that voluntarily choose to be housewives and they want to be housewives, you know.
Oh yeah, but no, that's the Cinderella complex. They don't really want that. They've just been brainwashed by the patriarchy or whatever. Yeah. Multinational companies.
Hang on, just on that. My own mother is one of those women. She had herself voted a non-woman by the Feminist Society at University because she preferred heterosexual marriage.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
How do you vote someone a non-woman?
You want to know what?
Yeah, political satire really is dead. It's.
You know, yeah, Shane. You want to know something ironic that I once read before? Some of the first opponents of the suffrage movement back in the women's suffrage movement, ironically, came from some feminist groups themselves, and the reason was because they were afraid that if they got involved in voting, they would be corrupted by the politics, with the mentality being, oh, come on, politics have already corrupted men. Let's not get women corrupted.
Yeah.
And
you can see their point, yeah. Multinational companies are unethically exploiting the plant genetic resources of developing countries. That one doesn't even make grammatical sense.
I think they're trying to aim at Monsanto, but
whatever.
GMOs, but yeah.
Screw whoever wrote that question.
You know,
and everyone who looks like the person who wrote that question. Making peace with the establishment is an important aspect of material. What does make peace with the establishment means?
And not to mention, they always talk about the establishment, but what if the establishment values personal liberty and all that? Then it's like, I wouldn't resist that. I'm only going to resist the establishment if it doesn't want me to, you know, live life the way I see fit. You know, I mean, but
not simply because it's the establishment, which is all this question gives us to work with.
Kind of. It sounds exactly like those hippies and those band members where they don't want to do something because that's selling out to the man. Who's the man?
All right. How many more pages have we got of this thing? Oh man, 2 more pages. All right. Religion. Okay. We can probably just blow through this, even though it probably doesn't have anything to do with astrology is crap. You can absolutely be moral without being religious.
Speaking as someone who is religious, yes, you can be moral without being religious. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Charity is better than Social Security. Some people are naturally unlucky. I don't even know what that's supposed to mean. I mean, there are people who have unfortunate things happen to them more so than other people just because of statistics, but this is supposed to be a question about religion, so are they saying that, like, people are cursed or something? I don't know. Bad question.
Yep. You wrote a bad question, Petey.
It is important that my child's school instills religious values. Even if I were religious, I wouldn't want my child's school doing it because they'll screw it up.
Yeah, actually.
Exactly.
Actually, if I recall correctly, that's actually another reason why some of the biggest advocates for secularism were actually religious people, was because of that. They were afraid if we get it in the schools and government, you know, it's going to become corrupted.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's gonna end up what happened to the Vatican and in the Catholic city when the Vatican became basically a political power. It became corrupted and it soon butchered, you know, what the original Catholics were trying to make, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the most ardent supporters of the separation between church and state were highly religious people who wanted the state to get out of the church's business.
Yep.
Yeah, because
they were afraid. They were afraid of other denominations oppressing them, and they were afraid of people in their own denomination getting in, but just completely misrepresenting it and screwing it up. Yeah.
Yeah, and not to mention, we just fought a war against the British Empire, which at the time, was still very religious, and they were going around persecuting non-Protestant groups.
All right. Final page. It's about sex. Ooh, okay.
Ooh.
Sex outside marriage is usually immoral. No. Same-sex couple should not be excluded from the possibility of child adoption. Okay, I'll agree with that.
No,
I mean, I think it should be... I think, there should be private organizations doing the adoption, not the state, but...
Yeah. Actually, Shane, I saw this funny political comic strip one time, where it was talking about, thanks to new revolutionary and biological design and engineering, it'll soon be possible for gay couples to have naturally born children, and all the gay couples are going, yay, and a bunch of kids in the orphanage are going, god damn it all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pornography should be legal, sure.
Yeah.
What goes on in a private bedroom is no business of the state. Agree. No one can feel naturally homosexual. What does that mean?
Yeah, I don't know what it is.
I don't know. Okay. Dumb question.
Well, and that's a thing. That's a thing, you know. And the thing is, you don't know what kind of sexuality you're going to be until you hit puberty, and even then, some people don't even know what it is. Like I've met some gay people that have said, yeah, in the past I did date and had sex with women, and it wasn't really until my 20s that I discovered I was gay because, you know, I was having relationships with girls, but they weren't fitting, and like I would really lose my interest. But then I met a guy, and I fell head over heels for him, and I realized, oh my God, I'm gay.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. So anyway, these days, openness about sex has gone too far. I disagree with that. All right, finally, we get to the end of this friggin' thing.
That's because you haven't hung out in the furry fandom, Shane.
Oh, God. Okay, maybe in furrydom it's gone too far.
That isn't even in the public, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know, look, you know, well, the thing with the furry fandom is that, you know, they're a little too open about it and all that, and they forget that just because you're a safe, open space does not mean everyone wants to hear that, you know, you like to wear diapers or you know, have sex with your car.
The same thing about a gay pride parade, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So people were predicting I would be right in the middle of the right libertarian quadrant, and we're going blah blah blah. We're saying all right, and we're explaining stuff about Pinochet for some reason. Okay, just show me my score. All right, here we are, towards the bottom, not all the way, but economic left right 7.5. Social libertarian, authoritarian, minus 8.15. So that means socialist, I'm libertarian
like
right.
Gandhi, I don't think Mahatma Gandhi was a socialist, though.
I don't know. He wasn't like a full-on Marxist, but I don't know.
It's pretty funny that you mentioned Pinochet, because a lot of people love to use Pinochet as an example. Oh, see, there can be a libertarian dictator. It's like, Pinochet was not a libertarian.
No.
And here's the thing. They always talk about how, oh yeah, but the Chilean hyperinflation of the 1970s proved free markets didn't work. The free market reforms that Milton Friedman was advocating for, they didn't occur until the 1980s when Pinochet was losing most of his power.
Yeah. They were really just things he did kind of in desperation to hold on to power, although Pinochet was arguably a lot better than his predecessor.
Yeah, I hate how people like to portray, Allende as like this innocent guy, who was overthrown by the CIA. But the thing is, it didn't take the CIA to overthrow him, because Allende, like, I'm not saying he deserved what he got, but he dug his own grave. Yeah, he destroyed the Chilean economy. He was persecuting other political rivals, and then when people were coming to him saying, why is Chile not getting any richer, he's like, oh, it's the rich people's fault. They're hogging all the wealth, and that led to a massive civil war between working people. And then Pinochet came along and said, hey, if you put me in power, I'll stop all the violence and restore safety. And people were like, okay. And here's another thing that gets ignored. While Pinochet was quote-unquote democratically elected, he wasn't elected by the people. He was elected by a committee.
Yeah. Braille guy, yes, I'm more ANCAP than you are. Nah. Is that like corner here supposed to be ANCAP? This real down corner here? I don't know. Because they don't have Rothbard on that chart up there, do they?
Oh no.
I guess that's Milton Friedman there, not David, but
yeah, Rothbard.
I don't know.
Oh, Rothbard.
I don't know. See, even after doing this, and even after having done this years ago, and even after reading all about it, I still have no idea what this means.
Yeah, I agree.
What does it mean that I'm at this little purple point here? I mean, like the question on art, if I had agreed instead of disagreed, how would that have affected this? It's just...
Yeah, that's another thing that a lot of these political compasses don't do that. There's one political compass I took that at the very least, it compares your answers to what other people said. Like, for instance, when I was it said I was a libertarian, but it also compared, you know, the answers I asked for. Like, for instance, one question said, you know, you answered this, and most libertarians tend to have the same answers. So,
yeah,
this isn't doing. But like you said, this isn't doing any of that. It's just saying, okay, here's your answer. Well, what did I do to get that? I don't know.
Well, then I guess that's it for this video. But yeah, I wanted to do this live so you could see all my reactions to these questions. Yeah. A lot better than putting up the cartoon avatar. I do have one written with the cartoon avatar. I didn't record it because after I recorded this week's Lord Killian video, my voice went out. So, well, ironically, it wasn't as extreme as the one last week. It's just you can probably hear my voice is still kind of not all the way there. Just how things have been going lately. It's, you know, sinuses and everything.
I think you've told me that, Shane, that's the reason why you don't do Lord Killian videos on a regular basis as you do your regular one, because that voice really gets to you.
Yeah, I mean, I can do it to record a 15 or 20 minute video. I couldn't do it on a live stream.
Yeah,
I couldn't maintain it.
I think you can only go live for so long.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just doing that Oscar the Grouch voice is just ordinarily hard on your throat. So, yeah.
And by the way, there's so many people on the internet thinking that they beat Shane Killian in a debate because he called them a liar and swore at them. They're like, every time I criticize them, he's like, no, you are fucking lying. And it's like, well, yeah.
And I showed how they were lying every single time.
And again, the reason why we swear and yell at you is not because we're meanies. It's because 90% of the time when you say something that you think is going to debunk them, it's stuff we've already covered. And it's like, people, we want a different answer or justification. You know, you're just spewing out the same thing you're saying over and over again.
Yeah. All right, well, if there's nothing else, we've been at this for like an hour and 10 minutes, a little longer than I wanted to go. So as long as no one has any parting shots, we'll be off.
Hey, Pipsqueak, how about that Star Wars?
Anything to say, Pip, before we sign off?
Some of these questions are extremely ambiguous. It's stupid.
Yeah.
So half of them shouldn't even be there.
Yeah, this is a dumb quiz, and it ultimately means nothing.
Yep, to quote Fantastic Mr. Fox, that you wrote a bad quiz, Petey.
And you should feel bad. You really should. Oh my God, this is such a bad quiz.
You should feel bad for it.
I'm saying they should feel bad. Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
That's a really good underrated movie, Fantastic Mr. Fox. A lot of people say it's weird and bizarre, but so was the original book, if I recall correctly.
Yeah. All right, well, I'm going to sign off then. Thanks to all my supporters. Thanks, Pip, for being a supporter for so long. You know, the longtime supporters are great. Yeah. Thanks to everyone else who's been a supporter. Thanks to everyone who participated in chat. And, of course, thank you for watching. Until next time, stay strong and be free.